There's something to be said about underrated films. True, no film is perfect, however, some films find themselves scrutinized for no logical reason. One of the most criticized movies from my childhood happens to be Steven Spielberg's Hook. Just pulling up the film's tomato meter baffles me. How in the hell could a movie get such a warm response from audiences and virtual loathing hatred from film critics? Could they be onto something the little people don't know about? Well, let's see. I've taken the liberty of going through most of the criticisms that seem to be thrown towards Hook, and I've come up with a pretty level consensus. Do they hold up? Are they valid? Is the movie really that bad? I'm going to be looking at this through my own critical eye, and also try to remain as objective as humanly possible about this film's quality. This is me critiquing this film's criticism. And it's something I'd like to do more often, specifically with films that I grew up with or films that have come out recently that I think have gotten not the best critical analysis. Sometimes people can have an idea of a movie they want to see in their head, and once they leave the theater, be very disappointed just because it didn't match up to their expectations, and not really judge a film on its quality, more or less judge it on what they thought the movie should be themselves. I think this is a major weakness for film criticism and something that happens very, very often, more often than people actually think. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with Steven Spielberg's 1991 classic, Hook. Number 1. The film is too childish. Now before I even begin, I want to say that this is somewhat of an illogical criticism when put under a direct review. Upon further inspection, the tonal shifts the movie presents can at times be a bit off. The entire setup for Hook is really a pretty fascinating idea though. What if Peter Pan grew up? Who would he be? The psychology of this man's character is played to brilliant effect by John Williams, and the writing here is great too. It's played very, very serious, and once we get to Neverland, we actually do teeter back and forth from cartoony to realistic. Hook's attempted suicide, followed by Peter's training with the Lost Boys, is a bit much, but it never feels so disjointed it's a tonally different film. In fact, the chemistry between Smee and Hook kind of segues into these scenes rather nicely. That doesn't make Hook immune to tonal inconsistencies, though it happens quite often in the movie. However, if a family movie gets a little kid-friendly when visiting Neverland and hanging out with the Lost Boys, you kind of have to accept that as normal. The movie starts in a very real world with very real people and things, but this is a movie about Peter Pan after all. So for someone to actually criticize that the film is just too childish and base that off of a major criticism they have with the film, I'm sorry, but that's majorly invalid. You're talking about source material that is made for children. Yes, you're adulting it, so to speak. You're trying to give it a realistic psychological basis, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with a children's story. And for you to decry that a film is too childish, I do not consider that a valid criticism. Now, if you were to acknowledge the tonal inconsistencies between teetering back from childish to adult, that would make more sense, but at the same time, we're dealing with the growth of a child, Peter Pan, into an adult, Peter Banning. And I think the movie actually handles it well enough. There are some issues with it, but to just say the film is childish, that's invalid. Number 2, the movie is extremely exposition heavy. Probably the biggest complaint given about Hook is the fact that there is just so much on the nose explaining of what everything means and how everything is going on and why and what and when and who and all at once that becomes tedious and downright boring. Does Hook have a lot of exposition? Yes. Does it hinder on the film? Well, I guess that's more open to debate. I personally love the scenes that elaborate on Peter's past. Watching Granny Wendy grow old while Peter goes into detail about how and what he remembers is a truly amazing scene. Watching his family fall apart from a result of his job addiction and refusal to acknowledge his kids is pretty solid storytelling. Now, do some scenes feel a bit much? Well, I could personally do without the scene where Thud gives Peter Toodles marbles, but it is what it is. This level of exposition is necessary for the film, to be honest. I mean, you can't just start the movie with Peter coming in drunk as hell, smashing a bottle of Fireball over Jack's head and have Tinkerbell fly in telling him, "Dude, stop, love your kids." This movie is far more intelligent than I think a lot of critics give it credit for because of the expository dialogue or scenes that get used towards the middle to the end of the film. And I think that's pretty unfortunate because there's actually extremely good filmmaking happening here. And it's not the visual storytelling that suffered from it. The film is downright gorgeous. That actually leads me into number 3. The sets look unreal. I hate to break it to my fellow 90s kids out there, but there are some scenes in Hook that look pretty synthetic. I mean, most of what I've seen is from the first time we see Peter look out over the dock our pirate villains inhabit, and it just looks very contained and very unorganic, to be honest. That's not to say the whole movie looks cheap, quite the contrary. It's beautiful and feels like a storybook come to life. Maybe if the Jolly Roger moved out to sea or didn't stay stationary for the duration of the film, we'd get a more lifelike feel. But nevertheless, yes, it can seem a bit fake at times. So yeah, I'll say this is a pretty sound criticism. The way I oohed and awed at Reptile from Mortal Kombat, I just don't do anymore, and the same to some of the scenes in this film. Number 4. The third act is terrible. This is an issue some have with storytelling and culmination of events Hook ends on. By the way, spoiler alert, Peter's arrival to save Maggie and Jack from Hook is pretty fun in a swashbuckling movie buff's dream. It's as if someone went back to those old black and white Peter Pan films and colorized them for modern audiences. Most people seem pretty upset around the time Peter goes off to fight Hook. The Lost Boys do some super kid-friendly fighting, which is of course played for comedic effect, and the crocodile scene seems a bit overboard. Oh yeah, we'll talk about the croc in just a bit. However, I want to go back to the scene that plays right before we go off to fight Hook. There's a scene in which Julia Roberts transforms into a human after letting Peter know she has serious feelings for him. I remembered it was there, but I forgot its context honestly all these years later, and I'm sorry to say after rewatching it, unfortunately, it doesn't make any sense. At least not any sense I can make out of it. She just grows a bit. They don't explain why, they don't tell us how, it just kind of happens. And I bring this up because I feel it's this scene that is responsible for most people disliking everything after it. And there's some sweet dialogue in there, and I feel bad for Tink because she'll never be with Peter, but honestly, I don't understand what the point was. It's a valid criticism to say it came out of nowhere and is out of place because that's exactly what it is. It's pretty weird seeing that happen for no explanation and just out of the blue. And speaking of scenes with no explanation, let's go back to that big stuffed crocodile in the middle of town. Peter grabs El Capitan by the hook and shoves it in the beast. It then begins to emit smoke and roar. Why? Who knows? Hook is even screaming. What the hell is going on? It's actually kind of funny because of the lack of context this makes. He's just as confused as the critics. The croc swallows him whole and burps. The kids look up at it and just can't seem to find him. The crocodile obviously ate Hook, and it was obviously dead. I'll go out on a limb and defend this scene though. This to me is actually a bit of a teaser for a future Spielberg movie. How far into the future? Well, his very next project. You see, Spielberg had just acquired the rights to a certain movie for Universal in 1990, around the time this movie was being filmed. Malia Scotch-Marmo, a writer for Hook, even did an uncredited rewrite to the movie that would become Jurassic Park. And in my eyes, this was always a little preview or glimpse of Spielberg going, "Alright kids, guess what's coming next?" I could be completely wrong on that, but it's how I always took the scene. Now that being said, does the scene make sense in the context of the world it's built? Maybe. There's a lot of magic and mystery in Neverland, and a lot of stuff that wouldn't happen in the real world. But they kind of do explicitly say earlier that Hook killed the crocodile and stuffed him for the whole town to see. Does that mean this Neverland croc can't come back to enact revenge on Hook after getting stabbed in the belly where no doubt his hand was digested all those years ago? I mean, I don't know. Is it valid criticism? Again, this is pretty subjective on this one. You can take that whole part and hate it with a passion, or you can say, yeah, Neverland has magic and that's alright. This is one of the parts of the film that I truly enjoy talking with different people on, because it can be viewed in two separate ways. As for the aforementioned growing of Tinkerbell, though, that's a negative part in the film and due to the fact that they just don't explain it. Number 5. Was it all a dream? This is the weirdest criticism in my opinion. No, it totally wasn't a dream. Toodles is flying. Tink is talking to Peter, and Jack and Maggie and Wendy are all ecstatic about Toodles flying over England. Just one issue. Why the hell aren't Liza and Maura like, holy shit, that guy is flying? As far as I know, they were never lost girls. Honestly, that's illogical. Before that, though, we see Smee, or a man that is Smee-like, who talks to Peter before mopping up some trash on the pavement. Who is this man? Is he someone mysterious Peter knows? Honestly, I have no idea. Another issue for the film. Again, this is a valid complaint that the film ends on a vague note. I have no clue what to think of all this, and could it really be Smee? Well, I don't think so. It could be his real-world counterpart, or just some guy that looks like him, though, too. It's never explained, so I have no answer. Can you criticize it? Sure, you can criticize that. Number 6. It's boring, stupid, and overinflated. False. Absolutely false. A lot of people love to put this movie in Spielberg's worst category. Oddly enough, along with a couple other movies that are far superior to some of his other works. You just may see a video from me on them. Bottom line, Hook is a brilliant look into the psychology of an adult Peter Pan that has not only forgotten how to be a father, but has also forgotten who he is and where he's from. The movie is shot and filmed with amazing expertise and feels like a true work of art come to life, straight out of an old storybook. It's filled with superb character performances and tells a really compelling story about the trials this man has to go through to literally win back his children. One thing the film never gets attention for is its portrayal of a custody battle between a father and a surrogate. Captain Hook is willing to do absolutely anything necessary to kill Peter Pan, even if he has to cozy up to Pan's kids in order to play them against Peter himself. Jack goes through a pretty hateful transformation of resentment and hurt that he's felt from his father's neglect, and it's captured quite beautifully by Spielberg. It's got loads of set pieces and a lot of fun swashbuckling action, but that never takes the focus off of the main story. A father's fight to regain the love of his children. Too much exposition? Maybe. Too much production value? Are you serious? Too much character building scenes that help us learn more about worlds that we're in and what we're all up against? I disagree. This film is absolutely chock full of great scenes and great fun. Other than that, I can't really find any other criticisms about the movie. Oddly enough, it seems it's garnered a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes for some kind of flimsy reasons. I mean, I know it's not the end-all be-all of film reviews, but it's so well known I felt obligated to talk about how ludicrous some of these criticisms are. I mean, seriously, one of Steven Spielberg's worst movies? So why do critics hate Hook? I hate to say this, but maybe they just grew up and became Peter Banning. I simply cannot think badly of this movie, even though it has a few shortcomings. It's not a perfect film, don't get me wrong. Is it a masterpiece? No. Is it a good fun time? Abso-freaking-lutely, I love Hook. It's a childhood classic. Maybe someday I'll make an official review of it. Rufio's magnificence cannot be understated.
You are the Pan.
It's a classic, and if anyone tells you otherwise, show them this video. If you've liked what you've seen, I'd feel great if you left a like. Comment below, subscribe if you'd like more of me, and take it easy, guys.